Hello everyone, it's Paige and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am at King's Deer in Monument, Colorado. This is where, I grew up in Denver, Lakewood area, then my family moved here, and this is where I actually learned how to play golf. And so I thought today while I play, I would share some stories on how I got into golf, things that I've learned from playing, and just some funny stories about when I first started. So just get right into it. So I used to live off of the 18th hole here at King's Deer. I was a competitive gymnast, and the reason my family moved from Denver, Lakewood area to Colorado Springs was because they had a really good gym called Colorado Aerials in Colorado Springs, and I was really serious as a gymnast. And so to be more competitive, we had to move here for that. And my sister hated it because she had to move and ended up working out for her. But that's the original reason why we moved here. And then once I quit gymnastics, I fractured my kneecap twice, had a couple other really bad gruesome injuries. I also had a bad birthday for the Olympics, so you have to be 16 or turning 16 in the year of the Olympics, and you are your best when you're younger, and so I would have had to wait until I was 18 until I could have been able to compete. I also just didn't love it. It wasn't for me. I was a little too tall. I didn't have the right build for it. So once I quit gymnastics, my mom brought my aunt in, so her sister, who was a professional tennis player and put me through boot camp for tennis, hated it. My dad was like, okay, finally my time. So he took me out on the golf course and I fell in love with it right away. And I would mess around a little bit when I was younger, just a couple balls here and there. But my first time actually really hitting was at King's Deer, and this is where I kind of learned where to play golf. So kind of a cool story, and to come back, it's fun to see this course again. So it was the first course where I beat my dad for the first time, the first course that I shot par. So there's a lot of good memories here. And it was also too right after college, let me hit this shot, where I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I will tell the rest of the story on the next shot. So I went to University of Arizona, ended up transferring to San Diego State for a bunch of reasons, which I've talked about before. If you want to learn more about that, you can check out my podcast where I go in detail about everything. But once I finished school, I said I never wanted to play golf again because I was just so over it. After playing junior golf at a really high level and then Division I college golf for 4 years, I just lost my passion for it. And so I told my dad I was done playing, and I put the clubs away for about a month. And at that time, I was here in Colorado Springs. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was really lost in my life. And so my dad was like, okay, let's just give it a shot. Let's just see if you can play professionally. And so we would come out to this golf course and I would just play from the tips, keep score, and I was shooting consistently under par. And my dad's like, okay, let's just give it a go. And so that's when I started entering tournaments. I entered the Colorado match play tournament, where I ended up winning that event. And that day, the day that I won, was the day that I went viral. So again, it's crazy how everything happened. And that moment, yeah, it was cool that I won, but my entire life changed after that, from being posted and gaining so many followers and just going to Dubai that year. It literally has been a whirlwind since that moment, but it all stemmed from my dad kind of pushing me back into it. And I don't know what would have happened if I didn't give it another shot. Go in. Happy memories at this golf course. I think one thing that my parents did really well when I first got into golf was get me lessons right away. I feel that I was a little older when I started playing. I was 12, almost 13. So if you have a really young kid who wants to get into the game, maybe not lessons right away. But if they do start to get more serious about it, I think getting lessons is the best way to improve. Even if you're not a kid trying to get into the game, if you're an adult just picking golf up, I think that you have to get lessons lessons right away, because it just helps you understand the game so much better and you're getting good instruction right off the bat. I hate going to a driving range and seeing, you know, people's buddies, or if they're trying to teach their girlfriend and they're giving them horrible information and they right off the bat are frustrated because they're not hitting the ball right, or something doesn't feel right. And I'm like, because you're getting bad instruction. So if you have a kid that is really into it, get them a good instructor right away. It's going to make such a big difference. And that's one thing that really helps me. Another thing too is that there was a big focus on short game and putting, and so that really helped my game improve and develop. And start your kids out small, work big. And so start them out with short game and putting. And then also too, they let me just whack the ball as hard as I wanted to. And this was kind of the Andre Agassi philosophy, where you can hit as hard as you want and reel it back. It's harder to teach power. So again, going to a good instructor, they'll probably help you all through this. But if you don't have the financial means to be able to do so, start them out with short game and putting, build from there, and just let them hit the absolute crap out of it, and then you can reel them back. Oh. One mistake, well, there's a couple mistakes, I'll go through them, but the first mistake that I think that my parents made is that we put too much emphasis on having a perfect swing instead of playing. Get your kids out on the golf course and play for, obviously you don't have to play for money if they're young, but play for snacks, treats, whatever, but put pressure on the line. I was a range rat, so I spent all my time on the driving range trying to get an absolute perfect swing. And then so when it was time to compete, I wasn't ready for it, and I was nervous and I was scared, and I couldn't take my range game over to the golf course. So it's really important to get that competitive fire going when they're young, play for things, put pressure on them, but still make it fun, because that's the second thing that I wish my parents did a little bit differently. And they know all of this, so I don't feel bad, sorry mom and dad, but it was putting too much pressure on results when I was younger. So being in junior golf and looking at junior golf scoreboard and seeing where I was ranked constantly, it just got so in my head, and I think that's why I burnt out. And I see a lot of really good promising juniors burn out because I think there's just so much pressure on them. And then that's that fine balance of putting pressure on them so they're used to it, but not too much where if they have a bad day or something goes wrong that they feel like you're disappointed in them. If they're putting all of their effort into and they're trying really hard, then support them and make them feel like they're doing great, and like do fun games to put that pressure, but not in the sense where it's like, you're not ranked high enough, you're not good enough, you're never going to go to this school, you're not, you know, there's like that difference. So I think knowing like good pressure from bad pressure and encouraging them when there are ups and downs. I came from a sports family, and golf is very different than a lot of the other sports, and you're gonna have those ups and downs. You're never gonna be really steady or just a constant up. And so realize that. And so when your kid is on a down, really try to support them. I think because my family came from different sports and you don't do this as much in other sports, it's pretty consistent, that they expected me to always be at this level. And sometimes I was here instead of there. And that really got to me sometimes. And a lot of it was self-induced pressure, but I just think that if we put less focus on the results when I was younger as a junior golfer, then maybe I would have had a better college career, and maybe professionally I wouldn't have been as burnt out. So we talked about junior golf, and on the next shot we're going to talk about college golf and the recruiting process and what I did well and what I wish I did a little differently. So something I did really well was I transferred, and I didn't just wait or just be unhappy. I realized that I was unhappy where I was, and I transferred very quickly. I transferred after the fall of my sophomore year, and it wasn't a right fit for me. And I see so many people stay in a college for way too long, or they transfer their senior year, or they just don't transfer at all and they end up being miserable. I realized that it wasn't the place for me, and I ended up going somewhere else. And it worked out so much better. I loved being at San Diego. I made some of my best friends there. I loved the head coach, Leslie Spalding, and she became kind of like a mentor to me. So transferring at the time was a very difficult decision, and it was very hard for me to make. But once I committed to it, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So if you have any kids that are going through that process that they just didn't find the right fit, that's totally fine. Just support them through the transferring process, because once they do that, they're going to be so much happier. One thing that I wish I did differently was the recruiting process. So I was a very quick commit. So I committed, like as soon as I could commit, I committed to University of Arizona, and then the head coach ended up leaving, and she was the main reason I decided to go there. I just loved her so much, and I connected. And again, there was nothing wrong with the new coach. She's great. She's built a great program, but our personalities just didn't quite mesh up. And the girl she was recruiting, again, we just didn't quite mesh up. And so my game just went straight downhill, and I wasn't playing well. I wasn't happy. And I wish that I visited more schools. University of Arizona was the second school that I visited. U of A was my first choice. And I wanted to stay close to home, and I didn't go on any other recruiting trips. I didn't talk to really anyone else, and I was just dead set on that. I wish that I went on so many recruiting trips. I visited the campuses. I met different teams. I just wish I enjoyed the process so much. There's so much pressure to commit early, and because you see all the other kids committing and you know where they're going, and so you want to have your place. You don't want to feel left behind, but that doesn't matter. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about, where you need to not focus on anyone else, results, whatever. You need to focus on yourself and what you're doing. And so if you're going through the recruiting process, take as much time as you need, because it's going to be way more beneficial in the long run. It's so weird being back at like my old stomping grounds and seeing courses that I first started playing at. And I remember some of these holes being so incredibly difficult. And now that I've traveled and I've played some really amazing golf courses, it's not as hard as I thought it used to be. There are some holes where I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most difficult golf course I've ever played. And then I come back now, and it's fun to play it again and have a different perspective and see how my game has changed and how the holes look different. And it's just really fun to come back to courses that you like grew up playing at. And I just have like all these memories of good memories of, new accomplishments, but also so many bad memories of just like crying on the golf course because I was frustrated and storming off. I remember it was like 4th of July and my dad wanted to play golf, and I was just like right when I started when I was 13, and I ended up just walking off the golf course in tears because I was so miserable because I was playing so bad. And that happened a lot. So again, this goes back to what I was saying, like don't be too hard on yourself, but it is funny, like all the good and all of the bad. It just shows like how hard golf is sometimes. Even though my dad got me into the game, my mom was really the driving force behind my golf career. So she would stand out on the range with me forever and just watch me hit golf balls. And so anytime I go back to like when we came to King's Deer, people always remember me and my mom, like we were a dynamic duo, and like, oh, I remember you and your mom standing out there for hours and hours and hours. And so, there's always like that misconception, I guess, that it's always like the dad and the daughter, or the son and the dad, but it was really me and my mom. And like she was the person that would always take me to tournaments, always be out there, and she was a stickler. Like she was a hard coach. But again, it's just funny how everyone always just remembers me and my mom and hitting for hours. And I think that when you look at my Instagram account or my golf career, you would probably assume that I didn't practice all that hard and that's why I didn't make it, but it was actually the opposite. Anyone who knew me when I was in junior golf or even college and professionally, I was one of the hardest workers out there. I would spend hours and hours and hours at the golf course on the range, grinding day in and day out, and people who saw me and my mom can definitely confirm that we would spend literally hours out there together just trying to get better. So it is funny because like when you talk to someone who knew me in junior golf, they always ask about my mom because my mom was literally like glued to my hip. So we talked about how I got into the game, junior golf, college golf, and a little bit of pro, but here are some things that I wish I knew before I really got into it, and it's how good you have to be. And I was a good player, and when I was playing, like I was telling you, I'd come out here with my dad and I would shoot under par, but I was shooting like 71s to about 68s on a course about this easy from the tips. I should have been shooting around 64 to 62. When you're playing a course that you know, like your home course, you need to be shooting low 60s to be able to even have a chance to compete against the top players in the world. I think that people don't have an understanding of how good that next level is. I am a very good player, a very, very good player. I can go out to any golf course. I would say at any given time, I'm the best player there, unless there is a tour player who is playing mini tour or at that next level. And they are, again, if I'm here, they're here. And that jump is so incredibly difficult. I was doing well in the mini tours. I was cashing checks. But that next step, that next jump is so incredibly difficult. And people don't realize how good you need to be to get there. And I didn't realize that. I thought just shooting under par was going to be good enough. It is not good enough because you could be doing on a golf course like this where the conditions are just normal, where the rough isn't that high, the fairways are a little thicker, the greens are receptive, and they aren't rolling that fast. But when you go to other events, the courses play so much harder, and I wasn't prepared for that. So if you're trying to make it play the most difficult golf course you can find and make that your home course, I was practicing on a course that was very easy, and so I had a false sense of reality of where my game was at, and then I would go to these events and just like be completely lost because I didn't know what was going on. So again, you need to be at your peak form, and maybe then you'll just make it. But you do have to kind of manage your expectations and be realistic about your game if you want to try to play professionally, because it's a very competitive, hard route, and a lot of people don't realize how incredibly good the professional golfers actually are. Because you guys say all the time that I'm not very good, and I know I could whip all your butts, and I still wasn't good enough to play professionally. It's just that next level. So again, it's people like watching them on TV just doesn't do it justice. Another thing I wish I knew before I started playing professionally was how expensive it was going to be. Golf, as we know, is a very expensive sport, but even playing at that next level competitively is unbelievably expensive. You have to pay for, obviously, your clubs, all of your equipment, gear, tees, balls, all of that, hats. And then you have to pay for usually a practice facility. You need to pay for tee times. You have to pay for your travel expenses. You have to pay tournament entry fees. Like all of this adds up. And so that is actually why I ended up getting a second job of doing media work, was to pay for my golf career, because I had no financial backing. And you either need to do it through sponsors, and as a female golfer, that is incredibly difficult. It's just not really out there. Or you have to do it by getting another job, or you have to do it by having someone give you money, but then you have to give them money back. And so I definitely didn't want to do that. And so I was like, I can make money through media work to pay for my golf career. I'll do that. And so that's kind of how it progressed of me doing both. And it was incredibly difficult because I wasn't doing either of them really well because I was splitting my time. I couldn't really focus on both of them. And that is why after playing that year and I just had enough of it that I decided to end up focusing more on the media work, which I'm so happy I did that. But I always think in the back of my mind, like, what if I went the other route and I didn't do media and I only focused on golf? Like what it could have been, I guess, but that's not a good way to think. Don't think that way. I'm really happy at the decision I did made. But sometimes I'm like, maybe I should go back and play, or maybe I should have done this. So I don't know, but I am happy with the decision that I did end up making. So that is it for today's vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know you love the Q&A that I did before, and so I tried to use that same format and just tell you a little bit about my golf career, because again, I think that just gets a little lost in everything else that I do, and especially my Instagram. And so I like to show you a little bit more about me, tell you about my golf career, so you guys tend to always have questions about that. So I'm going to finish out this hole and I'm going to wrap up this video. So like it, leave a comment down below, subscribe, and I will see you guys next Thursday. Pretty good?